Let's see here. Okay, great. So, howdy, howdy. I'm here with Dennis Roberson, who has written the seminal book on 42, Winning 42. What was the first year that that book was published?
It was initially published in 1997,
Right,
which is
and that
kind of
was
hard to believe now. That's a long time ago.
right. That was by Texas Tech University
Texas Tech
Press.
University Press, yes.
So, could you just walk me through the process? Like, how did you approach them about this?
Well, once I had actually been fiddling with that book for many years, putting it up, taking it, putting it down, working on it, not working on it. When I play 42, I'd get an interesting hand that I think could go in a book, and I'd jot down what the hand was and put it in a manila folder. And finally, I decided, you know what, you need to get off the fence on this deal. Do it or don't do it. And obviously, it's a regional interest subject matter. So I immediately said, well, only a university press who's interested in Texas history would be interested in a book like this. And so I sent a letter, a query letter to SMU Press, TCU Press, Texas A&M Press, Texas University Press, and Texas Tech Press, just all five of them, same time. And I was well aware of the proliferation of 42 playing on the A&M campus more than any other
Sure.
school. So I thought, they may be the most likely one. I went to Texas, so I was thinking, well, maybe because I'm an alum, they might, have some extra interest. And then also I live in Fort Worth, so I thought, well, maybe TCU will have some interest because I'm from Fort Worth. Well, uh, didn't hear from SMU, didn't hear from TCU, didn't hear from A&M.
Right.
I got a very nice letter from Texas saying, this is very interesting. We kind of like the idea, but, with the proliferation of technology and video games or whatever, we think this is just an old person's game now. And there's really not a market for it because young people aren't going to be interested in this game.
Sure.
Thanks for the letter.
Sure.
So I thought, well, this is getting bad. And then one day I got a phone call from an editor at the Texas Tech Press, very nice woman, and she said, "I got your letter, and I was very interested in the story about this game." But she says, "I'm not from Texas, so I don't really have this ingrained knowledge or awareness of 42." But she said, "My husband is from Texas," and so I went home and I asked him about this letter and this game. And he didn't stop talking for 2 hours because he had grown up with 42
Sure.
and just regaled her with all these stories about growing up with 42 in his town. I don't remember where he grew up, but I think it was probably out west, Panhandle or West Texas. And she said, after he got through, I knew that we had to do this book.
Okay.
So I thought that was fantastic. And so
Sure.
we talked about how we wanted to flesh out the information that I'd presented. And so I got a green light, and we spent a year probably finishing the book, and got it published in 1997. And we're going to be coming out next year with our 6th edition.
Wow.
So it continues to sell, which is very gratifying.
So on a side note, I just to promote my own personal vendetta, I'm actually challenging. I have a press release at tx.ag/MOC42, Minister of Culture 42, where I have challenged Matthew McConaughey to a 42 game before the Texas A&M game on November 30th this year. Now I don't know if he's ever going to see it or if I'm going to get to his people. I'm going to try to see if I can get Mildred Sherbill. Her niece apparently went to school with him and knows the guy. So, maybe play the side angle. And in the press release, I throw a couple of jabs, the self-proclaimed minister of culture. Yeah, come on.
Right.
You don't know how to play chicken. I mean, try to see if and then I said that the loser has to sing the other team's fight song.
Nice.
So, just whimsical enough that he might go for it.
Right. Yeah. That'd be good.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. I don't know. Again, not a sure thing that he would do this or not, but certainly going to try.
He's a first generation Texan. His parents moved to Texas, and he was born in Uvalde, I believe. So I have actually reached out to him to try to find out if his parents or his family ever came across 42, because I thought that would be a great story, but I never heard from him. So I'm assuming that he may not have.
Well, maybe, I don't know, but like also the NPR station here in Austin is a station called KUT.
Right.
And they agreed that they'll do a radio interview with me if I get him to say yes.
Nice.
So, you know,
Fingers crossed.
Well, and I see it that if he does go for it, it promotes the game.
Sure, absolutely.
You know, it gets people to go, well, what is this thing?
It's something different than betting barbecue against each other, right? Or something like that. Yeah.
Exactly. It's got enough kitschiness. I've also been trying to get Lyle Lovett to write a, country western song about 42. Because it's mentioned in Desperados Waiting on a Train.
Yeah.
Like just one little throwaway line about how they're playing Moon in 42.
Yeah, yeah.
But the song is not about that.
Right.
It's just a little throwaway line in a song.
Yeah.
So I would like a song about 42.
And Lyle plays 42. So
right, exactly. This is one of the and he occasionally likes my tweets when I kind of say, "Come on, buddy. I know you're playing Carnegie Hall, but while you're on this, maybe you write a little. Isn't this the gist of country western music? Kitschy baloney crap that nobody's heard of?"
Right. And that's what he's been doing. He's just having fun the last 5 years of his career songwriting. He's just writing a lot of fun songs because, he's not trying to change the world anymore, right?
Sure, right. Or marry Julia Roberts or whatever, right? So hopefully, who knows? Again, I keep and I am also in contact with some people at the state fair where they are interested in having a 42 tournament.
Cool.
But and I want them to like put up like a giant set of dominoes like they do with the giant chess.
Right.
At the resorts where nobody plays the chess.
Right.
It's just a homage to the game.
Yeah.
So that you would do something like this at the state fair and they just have like a little placard where you talk about the game and then have the kids play with the giant dominoes and get some pictures with the giant dominoes.
Yeah.
So I would like to see someone at the state fair do something with it just because it has such a strong history with the state and that it would be a perfect, in my opinion, type of thing for the state fair. So you had mentioned that you had some knowledge of whenever they used to play 42 at Texas Stadium in Arlington.
Yeah, when we were researching the book. See, I grew up playing strictly in family and social situations, and my dad was like a second generation 42 player. He learned from his father and grew up in Temple, and so he passed it down to us. And we never knew tournaments even existed in the 42 world. Had no idea, never heard of it. But when I got into developing the book, we heard about it and discovered it. And I said, well, if I'm going to do a really good comprehensive book, I need to be able to address this tournament world. And Dad, you and I need to start going to tournaments and meet these people. And I want to hear their stories of growing up with 42. And that's what we started doing. I remember the first one we went to, I think, was the De Leon Watermelon Festival.
Right, the one in
42
Nacogdoches.
Tournament. Yeah. And so I started engaging all these people and learning about the tournament world. And Dad and I played in a lot of tournaments for years. Living up here in the Metroplex, there was a Dallas 42 club based out of Garland that was very active in staging several tournaments a year. And there was just a lot of people in the Dallas County area. And the Irving tournament was, I think, every April, kind of the first big tournament after the state championship. And unfortunately, it was predated me, but the Irving tournament, at some point, they got to hold their tournament at the Texas Stadium. And they named it the Super Bowl of 42. So this tournament gained a lot of cachet and a lot of people wanted to play in it just because it was Texas Stadium. I don't know how many years they had it there, but at some point, I don't know if, Jerry raised the rent or
somebody died,
whatever happened like that.
The organizer guy, right. Yeah.
Yeah. Before I ever had a chance to play in it, they had moved to, just some venue in the city of Irving.
Well, I don't know if you know this, but like the Abilene Club has a very healthy club.
Yes, very active club.
That's been run by the former mayor Anthony Williams.
Yeah,
and he keeps talking about how he has some connections in the state capitol, and he wants to get a 42 tournament in the state capitol.
That would be great.
Like he would like to get TOC, the Tournament of Champions. And 42 PA Championship, the Super Bowl of 42 now.
Nice.
To be played in the state capitol because it would be just such an iconic venue.
Yes.
For the tournament. I would definitely play in it if he makes it. I mean, I don't know.
A road trip, even though I'm not in the the full Tournament of Champions annual, year-long structure of winning points, I would definitely make that road trip down to Austin for the weekend to play in that.
Yes. Well, I think you have to have at least 16 points to qualify to play.
Oh, okay.
So you have to play. Now, you get
maybe
2
I
points.
can appeal for a special exemption.
Maybe,
if I get a partner.
The book guy.
Yeah, the book guy.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know. So, well, the other thing is you only have when you show up and fall off the turnip truck and just don't do anything, you get 2 points.
Right.
At a tournament. So if you just show up to like 8 tournaments where you're the Friday night and the Saturday,
right.
Even if you didn't place in any of them, you'd have 16 points.
Okay, there you go.
So I mean, and actually technically that's just 4 tournaments.
Right.
Because it's the Friday night and the Saturday, and that's
you get 2 points for each.
You get 2 points for each,
okay.
And then so just 4 tournaments. If you did Friday, Saturday, and just showed up,
gotcha.
You'd have the minimum. Now you're not going to get seated very high.
Right. That's okay.
But you don't care. It's
to
just,
play in the state capitol. That would be awesome.
Yeah. Well, again, we'll see. I'm not holding my breath or anything to see if he'll actually make this happen. But yeah. So one other thing I did want to ask you about is you did actually write a commentary on the Texas42.net website with Paul Proft regarding the processes of indicating and show bidding or prompt bidding, which sometimes does occur. Usually, most people. I mean, I found that people frown on it. They see you doing it, and then they say, well, they're signaling, they're cheating, and then is that the way you want to win? But sometimes when you got these big tournaments and there's a lot of money, or at least a fairly hundreds of dollars or whatever, and then people are open. Now I will find when I've been recording the final table at some of these matches, and I found that when you record the matches, they don't do it.
Yeah. Oh, of course not.
Right, because you can go back and watch the video and see what they had and see what they're doing, and then you can tell that there's actual video evidence.
Right.
And then they don't do it.
Right.
So I like the recording from the standpoint that it deters.
Absolutely.
The practice.
Yeah. The more you can do it, the better.
Right. Sure. I mean, and again, the whole reason I started it was because there's a guy, Morgan Scott, that he lives out in, I think, wherever, London, Texas, I think.
Yeah.
And he was like, cornhole is on TV. Pillow fight is on TV.
I don't understand it.
How could Texas 42 not be on TV?
Right.
And I think some of it is the show bidding and the cheating and the signaling. But then if you did record it, it would deter that, in my opinion.
But I also think part of that could be, like we were talking earlier before we started recording, is the games can go so fast from a TV perspective. There's not much of an opportunity to actually commentate and show what's going on or the decisions that a player's making, because you can play a hand in 2 minutes. Boom.
No, you're right. And the more significant the matches, the more experienced the players are, and the more they're like, boom, boom, okay, and they shove them all in, and everyone's like, what happened?
But if you could pre-record it and then edit it and actually make it stretch out and overlay commentation to explain what's going on and seeing each player's hand, I think that would be very interesting.
Yeah. So me personally, I never actually stream the matches live. So all the commentation I do, I always just record the camera positions, and then I put them into an aggregated video, and I do overlay the commentation. But I admit I'm not a professional videographer.
Right.
So I don't do a lot of the nuance of like, slowing it down between the hands and saying, oh, well, that's what happened on that hand. And then this hand, this is what's happening. But I also find that actually I don't want to be overly critical of the players. Like whenever they drive home with the 5-5 or they do something where later on they regret playing the hand the way they played it. Yeah. I don't want to like, really, just annihilate them in the commentary, because I'm not really trying to humiliate anyone.
Right. Yeah.
Or open them up to ridicule. I just want, I'm doing it for, like, there's a guy in France who plays the app, but he doesn't have anyone that knows how to play 42.
Right.
So he loves the game, and he's always on Facebook commenting and watching people's stuff. And so whenever you're recording the matches, you're kind of recording it for guys like him.
Yeah, I think it's a great teaching tool. That doesn't have to be the World Series of Poker with $1 million on the line. It's just, hey, here's a real world teaching tool instead of just reading it in a book and having somebody explain that you should do this in this situation. You're seeing it live, and and it's okay to see somebody make a mistake. Sometimes you have a 50-50 choice on a domino to play.
Right.
So
no, I mean, you're right. I mean, there was a time I could have won a
so
tournament.
Sometimes you guess right, sometimes you guess wrong, and you can't go back and say the person made a bad choice just because it turned out wrong, because they didn't have that information when they made their choice. So
sure. Like one time when in Austin, they have a plaque, that's like the Top Gun plaque, where if you win the league,
right.
And now Austin has won probably about 7 of the last 11 state championships.
Yeah.
So if you can win in Austin, you can win anywhere.
Right.
So winning the Austin League is a good deal.
It's a big deal. Yeah.
I before I joined the Austin League, I mean, Jody likes to joke around, like in the old days, before I showed up, they had a vote about who the best 42 player was in the world. and that 20 of the 30 people that voted for themselves.
There you go.
So no lack of confidence or ego in that club.
Yeah, there you go.
But there were times where I'd be playing, and the one time I did win that I got my name on the plaque, one of our first early matches, we'd lost our first game. In the second game, they were up 6-5, and I win 84. And I was trying to walk the 4-3 behind the 4-4, and because the opponent on my right had 2 aces, and I win in aces, he was never able to throw the 3-3 to tell his partner that it wasn't threes. So right. I threw the ace, and he had to play an ace. And I played the ace-6, and he had to play an ace. And I played the 5-5, and he had a 5. And I played the 6-6, and he had a 6. And then I played the ace blank, and it's the last ace. And this guy has to decide, is it threes or is it fours? Right. And this guy has the 3-3 and has been wanting to dump it
right
for every hand, but he's never, and so he chooses threes and it's fours, and
right.
So we win the game, and we went on to win the league.
Yeah.
But I need him to pick wrong.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or we lose right there.
Right. Yeah.
So obviously my name would not be on the plaque.
He didn't misplay. It was a 50-50 shot, and all of us have been in that position more often than not on an 84 hand, where sometimes you're saving for 3 or 4 dominoes, just 2 tricks into the hand, and you're going, right. Oh my gosh, and you got to start making choices without all the information you need, and you just hope you guess right,
Right. Well, when they're in that situation and they start, pausing, I just start humming the theme to Final Jeopardy.
Right.
Or give them the, the polar ice caps are melting or whatever,
right.
This type of thing, just to kind of hurry them up a little bit. But
yeah,
but they're really thinking about it, because they're trying to see, is there any information in the played tricks? Now, when you're going 84, you stack them, so you can't look at the whole thing. But anyway, so is there anything else that you'd like to add, or?
Well, one thing I'd like people to know about the book and how we did the book. First of all, I wanted to make sure that a person could learn the game from scratch.
Sure.
Somebody who had never played it can learn the game from scratch. And so I wrote it that way and organized it that way. But once I'd finished it, I had to test it on somebody. Yeah. I had to find a player that did not play 42 and say, I want you to read this. I want you to come back to me. And, does it make sense? Does it not make sense? Whatever. And so I did that. And I actually gave it to my wife, who had never played 42.
Sure.
And we were newly married, so I hadn't ingrained her yet into the family game. And she basically learned the game from my book. So that was that's number one. That's check the box. And then I wanted to make sure that it was also meaningful for an intermediate player, or, obviously an expert has no interest in reading all that. They know how to play the game.
Sure.
But for an intermediate player, and so I gave it to my dad, who obviously taught me how to play whatever, and he said, I think you've done a great job. You're giving away the family secrets, but not that there was really any secrets. It's just he gave me the thumbs up that, I think you've done a great job here. So that part was good. But then the other thing is, for the lifelong 42 player, the expert, that you don't need to read how I tell you to play 42. But there's some interesting stuff in there that I'm sure you're aware of, that we wanted, that was important for the book, and that Texas Tech Press wanted, and that was, we want to tell the story of 42. It's a
Right, the
Texas
history of
story,
42,
the
what
history of
happened.
the game, how it was invented in Texas, how it came about, how it's been passed down for generations orally. And so what I did, talking about starting to play tournaments and meet all these tournament players from around the state, I engaged a bunch of them and said, tell me your story. Where did you learn to play 42? Who taught you? Where in Texas did you grow up? And I found out very quickly, not only did I get these great stories about Uncle Joe or Grandmother Jane that taught them how to play, and these wonderful family stories about playing 42 at Christmas time, at family reunions, and all these kinds of things that I think are wonderful, and that I think experienced 42 players would love to read, because I think they could identify it, and it may sound a lot about their own story, like their own story growing up with 42. Just these great stories that go back, 50, 60, 70 years, uh, like my father and his father. So I think there's a lot of great stories there that veteran 42 players and hardened Texans would enjoy reading. And then the other part was, because the book was so successful, when we introduced it, when we came out with the second edition, we said, well, what can we do to add something to it? Because the instructional part's done. And so I thought, well, what if I could find a bunch of famous Texans that grew up playing 42, or they're from a 42 family? Wouldn't that be neat? And so I just started trying to identify and locate famous Texans of any walks of life: singers, actors, politicians, astronauts, you name it. Anybody that was famous from Texas, I would try to track them down and get in touch with them, which is not the easiest thing to do, to get an
No, it's
address for
not the
somebody like
simplest thing.
that, and see if I can hit on a few that played 42 and that they would respond to me and tell me their stories.
Sure.
Well, I mean, we hit the jackpot. And so there's a whole chapter in there also in the book about famous Texans who grew up in 42 families, and tell their story about what they remember growing up playing 42. And I'll never forget, one day I was at my real job working, and the phone rang, and it was Governor Ann Richards.
Oh, wow.
And she had gotten my letter and my survey about 42 players. She said, listen, I got this thing in the mail. I don't have time to fill this out and send it back to you. Can we just talk on the phone? And she just regaled me with all these memories that she had as a young child. And her father, she grew up during the Depression outside of Waco.
Sure.
And telling these stories about, you did two things when you were growing up. You either went to a church social, or you had an ice cream supper and played 42. And
Right.
she talked about hearing her. She said her dad had like a granite tabletop set on a couple of sawhorses out in their backyard. She said, I'll never forget the sound of them shaking those dominoes on that granite tabletop in the summertime.
Sure.
So I got all these great stories from famous Texans. And even after we had inserted that in the book in the second edition, I continue to hear snippets about other famous Texans that I never even thought of, or hadn't heard of, or hadn't been able to get in touch with, that knew how to play 42. And one of them that's going into this new edition that's coming out next spring, right after the state championship, was in the biography about Stevie Ray Vaughan. He was telling stories about growing up in Dallas, and his dad was like a club owner or whatever, and so he was in the music scene. And Bob Wills and the Texas Playboys would come through all the time, and they were good family friends. And he tells a story in his book about Bob Wills' band and the Playboys coming over to their house, and they jam, and then they play 42. And I
Well, that's a
thought,
good
oh my
story.
gosh, how amazing is this? Bob Wills and the Texas Playboys were 42 players, and Stevie Ray Vaughan was exposed to it when he was just a kid. So that story is going in the next edition of the book. So the main point being, I think there's a lot of fun information about the game and the history and the people behind the game and the players that lifelong 42 players who don't need any instruction would get a lot out of in the book.
Yeah, so and definitely I think, those stories are a big part of why the game continues to have a resonate, and I
Yeah.
mean, obviously it's a little challenging. You got to get four people. You have the thing where I just tell new people you're going to lose for a year. And that's a tough, you have to really like the game
Yeah.
to be willing to because a lot of it is pattern recognition, you know.
Right.
Hey, oh, the last time this happened, my partner had him 3 deep, and then I gotta void things so I can throw the dime whenever they punt the crappy off or whatever.
Right.
You know, that sort of thing. So, you know, and then you're kind of reading the table to figure out what's going on. It takes you some time to get those kinds of instincts in the game, but you know, so like the biggest 42 state championship that there ever was 2017, where they did an article in Texas Co-op magazine.
Yeah, I remember seeing that
about the game, and then they had 184 teams show up in Hallettsville, like almost 400 people. Yeah. And I don't know if you watched the Queen's Gambit, but there's this scene at the end of that miniseries where there's the people playing in Moscow for the love of the game, and it reminds me of Hallettsville.
Yeah,
it reminds me of just the clank of the dominoes on the tables, and then just feeling like this is an homage to the game. You know, like when I lost to the 7-year-old in 2017, that same year, you know, and the Google engineer loses to this savant kid, you know.
Right.
That story, people love that story. They just immediately started calling it the Hay Slayer, even though it was my partner that kept bidding 34 and getting 3 trumped. And his nickname was Johnny Dominoes. I was like, you should call it the Johnny Dominoes Slayer. They're like, that's too long, and Hay Slayer sounds better. I mean, you know.
Yeah.
So, but you know, so, and then I don't know if you know this, but there's one of the players now, blind.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah. Blind Mike, Mike Harrell out of Florence, and that they're going to do an article about him in the Texas Co-op magazine in November.
And he's a very good player.
Right. He got to the final table at state, not this year, but last year. Out of 150 teams, he was one of the 2 that made it to the final table. Now, I wasn't recording the game at that time.
Right.
I probably bought about $1,000 worth of, you know, different gear, like a little mini computer and some cameras and the tables and all this to set up the rig.
Right.
To record the matches, but and then I found that if I'm at the final, because I was going to record the Dixie Chicken this year, but then I was at the final table. So it's hard to be the videographer and play in the game.
Right, exactly.
You know, so when it's a one-man show, then it's like, well, you know, pick.
It's too much, yeah.
It's too much, yeah. But anyway, no, I appreciate your time. And I did want to, you know, pick your brain about things. Oh, I did have one last question. One thing, when I read your book, one of the takeaways I had is that a lot of the strategies and things that you present were presented from a standpoint of playing for points, which nobody does that anymore.
Right.
Like at all these tournaments, everyone just plays for marks, and nobody bothers to do the math and write it up and play to 250 and that shish kebab. So playing for points punishes overbidding.
Yes.
While playing for marks does not do that. So you get a lot more riverboat gambler, you know, just, you know, gunslinger dominoes whenever you're playing for marks. So I was wondering if you had to do it again and you were writing the book about how to win when you're playing for marks, is there anything you would have done differently?
I don't know that there is. I think I grew up playing points. I'd never heard of marks.
Sure, of course. No, I get why. I'm just curious.
And you played at 250 points. And if you're not the bidder, but you take 12 points and the bidder makes his 30 bid, then the score is 30-12. And that's how you keep scoring. The first one to 250 wins. So in that case, instead of taking 7 hands to win in marks, it might take a team 8 to get to 250, right? Or you could have some 84s, or you could set somebody really bad and you could go out in 6. And by setting somebody really bad, what I mean is when you set somebody in points, you get their bid plus how many points you took when setting them. So if they bid 35 and you got them 3 deep and you took 35, you got 70 points. So that's like winning 2 marks.
Right.
So it just makes it much more, you know, intriguing, I think, and fun. And I think it hones your skill better as a 42 player because it emphasizes setting much more, number one. And number two, it eliminates people that just wildly overbid their hand, no matter what, because they think that's the way you should play. And it punishes them. So in our family, we would keep track of who got set the worst. Like, oh my God, Uncle Joe went down 72 points nobody goes down 72 points. Usually if you get set, you get 50 points or maybe 55 or 60, but to go down 72, that means you might have only taken one trick, even though you won the bid because they had you 3 deep. So it's just a lot of fun, right? And we'd remember that, and we'd bring that back out and hold it over. Somebody said, well, yeah, you set me 65, but you went down 72 last time we played. So I think it really would make, if people were learning the game or wanted, just their experienced players want to try something new, try it. You're not going to like it if you've never played that way. I've heard that from people. Because the thing about marks is it just speeds the game up.
It's
especially for tournaments. So it means in a group setting or in a tournament setting, you can play more games in less time. And I get that 100%. No complaints. That's
in the tournaments, when you have 184 teams, it took them till 2 a.m. to crown the winner.
It takes
and
you
they've been playing since 8 o'clock the previous morning.
And you can play a lot of hands in a short amount of time. But when you play points and you play every trick, 7 tricks, and you're trying for every last nickel because that's going to help your score. And so some hands, the score is 242 to 232. So the match is going to end on this next hand. Well, how do you know who? So if you connect, the rule is whoever bids and goes over 250 wins. So even if, somebody, like, let's say somebody was at 249 and then the winning bidder on the last hand was only at 220. But bid 30. They bid 30 and made it to 250. The 249 team got 12, so they got 261. The winning bidder wins the match, even though technically they have 10 fewer points at that point. So, there's a lot of intrigue at the end of the hand sometimes to where you can go out, not even being the winning bidder, or you can have technically fewer points, but you bid and went out, so you win the match. But most people, you almost never come across anybody that played that way. I just grew up playing that way my whole life until we got into the tournament world.
Sure. Well, thank you, Dennis. I appreciate your time.
Yeah, I enjoyed the visit.
Yeah, for sure. And I'll be posting it. I have the Texas 42 YouTube channel. It's on youtube.com/ at Texas 42 is one way to get there. Another way is to go to youtube.com/C for channel, then /Texas 42. Either one of those. Because I got 100 subscribers, and I had to beg, borrow, and plead for about a year to get enough to get 100. Because if you don't get 100, you're just gobbledygook.
Oh, I got you.
You're just youtube.com gobbledygook.
Yeah, the search doesn't work. Yeah.
Right. But if you can get 100, then you can name the channel, and I named it Texas 42 before anybody else did. So,
gotcha.
It's kind of like the Hallettsville thing where they just started calling it the state championship. So it just became that because they were the ones. Now, in Mount Vernon, they call it the World Championship.
I saw that.
Yeah, even though there's only like 10 teams and it's not even as big. And for the longest time, Trey Deuce, the guy that runs it, he wasn't able to. He'd won the state championship twice in 2006 and 2008, but he had not been able to win his world championship. At one time, I went up there and played in it, and then after he got knocked out, he started rooting against his dad so that he wouldn't have to hear about it at Thanksgiving.
Right.
Now he finally did win this year. He partnered with Legend and he won the thing. So he finally did win his world championship. And I played in it a couple times. I have not won. But if I ever do win, I'm playing that Queen song all the time.
Yeah, there you go.
For sure. But anyway, just fun times.
Sure.
It's a fun game. I've always enjoed it. It's, at one time I walked into Sea Hunts, which was the old domino haunt in Austin.
Yeah, in Austin.
And everyone was at a tournament. And so it was deserted, and I walked up to the bartender, and she said, the Domihos aren't here. And I said, oh, well, I guess I'm one of them. But, just because the people that love the game really do love the game.
Yes.
But then I find that's my kids, they're like, Dad, I got to do math. Just tell me what domino to play, Dad. I don't want to do it. But so not for everybody.
Not for everybody. My 2 kids, that didn't have any interest in it, and I didn't force them. But I've also known families where their kids didn't either, but as they got older, they came back to it and have an interest in it.
Sure.
So you never know.
You never know. Well, thank you for your time, and thank you for contributing to the Texas 42 YouTube channel.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for everything you do to promote it.
Well, I try.
It's a great game, and it's worthy of promotion, and I encourage everybody to try it because it's very addicting and it's very fun.
Indeed. Well, have a great day.
Yep. Bye.